Pharaoh and the Fabulous Frog Invasion, written and illustrated by Asher Werner. The children of Israel were slaves long ago to the nasty king of Egypt, who was known as Pharaoh. But God set them free with a hand oh so strong, with wonders and miracles and a happy frog song. By the great Nile River you could always hear singing from the happy little frogs always jumping and springing. We must thank you, God, every day, at all times, for this beautiful river, for the mud and the slime. For tasty black beetles, we love how they crunch. For the flies and mosquitoes, we enjoy them for lunch. For our long sticky tongues and quick legs that spring, for all of these things, God, your praises we sing. But the evil Egyptians and Pharaoh their king had a very different song that they would all sing. Thank you, O Nile, for your waters so sweet. You water our fields so we can grow wheat. You're the splash in our baths and you're our cup of tea. Without you, mighty river, where would we be? Early one morning, Pharaoh came to the Nile to stroll on the banks of his river a while. Little did he know that tiny frog eyes were watching him when he stopped in surprise. At the sight of two men with long beards and deep eyes, whose faces shone bright as the sun in the skies, they were Moses and Aaron, and they came without warning to speak to old Pharaoh on that fine sunny morning. And then Moses raised high the staff in his hand, and the river turned to blood throughout the whole land. There was blood in the bathtub and blood in the sink, not a single drop of water to drink. Now the fun-loving frogs had a new song to sing for the thirsty Egyptians and Pharaoh, their king. The river is nothing, don't you all know? God is the boss, and it's his word that goes. And if you still think the secret to life is the Nile, we think you'll be thirsty for quite a long while. But that stubborn Pharaoh refused to give up. His magicians took some water in a cup and turned it to blood with a wink and a flick. You see, Pharaoh said, it's all just a trick. So Moses once again raised the staff in his hand, and the Nile started bubbling as a shudder shook the land. Then out of the river there arose a great beast, the most enormous frog in the west or the east. Its flippers crushed trees, its head reached a cloud, and its croak was like thunder, booming and loud. It pursed its big lips and let out a screech, and every green ear for miles it reached. From the river in the valley, from the mountains on high, they came by the thousands to answer the cry. They jumped around Egypt, croaking and singing the whole time, while their giant brother sank beneath the water and slime. The biggest and fattest kept hopping along till they reached Pharaoh's door and began a new song. Pharaoh, oh Pharaoh, we know you're inside. Pharaoh, oh Pharaoh, there's nowhere to hide. The light of God's glory, the whole land it fills, and so do his creatures, if that is his will. Pharaoh was asleep, his cap on his head, when the frogs burst in and hopped into his bed. They covered all of Egypt like a great green cloud, as their croaking song grew terribly loud. Frogs, 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 we're here and we're there, and God's mighty hand is everywhere. We're inside your houses and all over your beds. We croak in your bellies and sit on your heads. Then the brave frogs did something you might think they wouldn't. They hopped into ovens. Now don't say they couldn't. And those ovens were hot with a burning red flame, but those frogs hopped right in for God's holy name. Day and night the frogs croaked and sang until every Egyptian's eardrums rang. Finally, Pharaoh could take it no more. I want them all out the front door. Out of my bed and off of my head. I want them all out, alive or dead. Moses, please pray to God to take them from me. Then all of his people I'll allow to go free. So Moses went to God to pray, and all was quiet the very next day. The frogs lay lifeless on the ground, no croaking, no singing, not one little sound. But if you perked up your ears and listened really well, you could still hear their song. But from where, pray tell? Then out of an oven popped one little hopper, then popped two more, and here is the topper. Every brave frog that jumped into an oven came bursting right out, pushing and shoving, and this is what they sang. A miracle, we're all still alive. Of all the frogs in Egypt, we're the last to survive. Only God could do such a wonderful thing. He's our beloved Master and King. So they all hopped back to their home in the Nile, dancing and croaking and singing the whole while. But as soon as they left, that mean old Pharaoh went back on his word, much to his sorrow, because God was not waiting for Pharaoh, you see. If he wanted, in a moment, he could set the Jews free. But he had 8 more plagues to bring to the land to deliver his justice and show his great hand. And when the Jews finally left Egypt on that great day, the frogs were still singing of God's wondrous ways.